All right. Wonderful. All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Morgan. I'm an AmeriCorps member. While everyone is joining us, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping rules to our Zoom tonight and get ready while presenting our speaker. So as you join, here we go. Like I said, my name is Morgan Alonji. I'm an AmeriCorps member serving with Conservation Nebraska Common Ground Program. Conservation Nebraska's mission is to protect our state's natural legacy by educating the public, supporting communities, and increasing civic engagement, which we accomplish through locally led education efforts and community engagement projects to address local conservation concerns, such as tonight. Before our speaker tonight, there's a few things to go over. Your cameras will remain off and you will be muted throughout the entire presentation. But please, if you have any questions for Lauren tonight, go ahead and put those in the chat or the Q&A section. We will try to answer those as we go through her presentation, but also we will try to have some time at the end to address any additional questions that you may have. We are recording this tonight, so if you do miss anything or want to revisit this, it will be on our Conservation Nebraska YouTube page in a few weeks, so watch for that. And also, following our presentation tonight, we do have a brief survey that we ask you to please take, if you do not mind. Just a few questions. It is to support programming like this one, so we really do appreciate the time you give to fill that out and give that back to us. And anyone in attendance, if you are interested in speaking with a Conservation Nebraska member regarding conservation issues here in Nebraska, we do share our email address. I will put it in the chat, but if you are writing notes already, it is info@neconserve.org. So, and tonight we will welcome Lauren Salick. Lauren holds a Bachelor's of Science in Animal Science from Iowa State University and a Master's of Arts in Natural Science and Environmental Education from Hamline University, Her goal is to generate passion and respect for wild animals across all demographics by creating personal experiences and bonds between people and our natural world. And tonight we will be discussing turtles of Nebraska. Just some thoughts we have are: how did turtles evolve? What is the anatomy of a shell? This program addresses basic, I apologize, I might say this wrong, basic chelonian biology, as well as an introduction to the shelled friends who call Nebraska home. So I will hand it over to Lauren, and thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Morgan. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, so you should be able to see, should say turtles in Nebraska. Okay, cool. Here we go. So I'm going to talk about turtles tonight, and specifically the turtles that grace our great state of Nebraska. Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about basic turtle biology. I'll go through the 9 species of turtles that we do have here in Nebraska, and then I have a special guest who will come in and give us a little hands-on, eyes-on experience, and then we'll go through a couple things at the end. So before I get too far into things, I did want to talk about where I am broadcasting from here tonight, which is Nebraska Wildlife Rehab. We do have a hospital here just off 97th and Q Streets in Omaha. And our hospital is just like a veterinary hospital that you would take your dogs or cats to. However, it's completely for our native wild animals. So things like opossums, turtles, beavers, bats, raccoons, snakes, songbirds, all of that kind of stuff we see here at our center. This bottom picture here is of the bat release. So if you've ever been to the bat release event at the Joslin or the Riverfront last year, that's our event. So we release about 500 bats in the springtime. Okay, so next up, I just want to talk a little bit about why animals become injured and why the animals come to us. We see about 8,000 animals per year, and 90 to 95% of those animals unfortunately do come to us because of human action. Sometimes it's on purpose, but generally it's things that just happen to them because our communities live so closely together. So whether it's litter or fishing hooks or lures or lines, sticky traps, getting hit by a car, colliding with a window. Our communities are so closely knit together that we affect them and they affect us. And so that's why we believe that we're here. We're not here to disrupt the circle of life or nature. We just think that, we affect them on such a grand scale that we should try to help mitigate those effects. And lastly, this is your virtual tour. So these are our front doors here. We have a really awesome gift shop if you ever want to stop by. The top picture is the hospital. We also have a native prairie area out front, and just a little bit of a sneak peek into our surgery suite. And then we have a duck here who is getting an x-ray. So just a little bit of our stuff in action. So without further ado, let's jump into turtles. So turtles are a really cool species because we call them a dinosaur species because they started to come and adapt to have a shell and become the animal they are millions and millions of years ago. So about 250 million years ago, the first turtle started to come into being. So we all know that animals adapt and they change, but what we basically know as a turtle started to progress and adhere. What's kind of interesting is we can go through at this point in time and say pretty much where every animal came from and what exact was the proto species. In turtles, scientists are still kind of up for debate where they came from. If you are a geneticist and you study DNA, you would probably say, well, they more closely align with modern day reptiles and birds. Whereas if you are a morphologist or you study the way the body comes together, they say they're more closer to like lower types of classifications of reptiles like lizards and then also snakes. Either way, they are a reptile and they are a very, very old species. So what we kind of know about turtles, the biggest thing is they have a shell, right? So a little bit of anatomy here. We have the carapace is the top of the shell. The plastron is the bottom of the shell. And then the bridge is the part that connects it. So I want to do a little fun thing here. So open your chat boxes and I want you to tell me, do you think a turtle can come out of its shell? So put yes or no, or just Y or N, either way. But do you think a turtle can leave a shell like this picture suggests? I like the question marks. You're in the right place if you have questions. Part way. Okay, got a little bit of mix. Awesome. Well, I'm seeing the consensus is no, which would be correct. So when you go to a nature center or something and you see an empty turtle shell like this, unfortunately, the turtle has passed, right? The turtle is dead. The shell is what remains as well as some bones. So just like when you go hiking in the woods and you see some bones of a deceased critter, the shell certainly takes a very, very, very long time to break down. And so it's left with the bones. That is because the shell is connected to, it is part of the spine and the rib cage of the animal. So just like we cannot pull our spine out of our back, the turtles cannot come out of their shell. It's not like a hermit crab situation where they leave their shells and can find a new one. They are born with their shell, it grows with them, and it is with them until the day they die. So it is a very integral part of their body. Just looking at our phylogeny tree here, we have about 300 species globally of turtles. They split first into side-necked and hidden-necked turtles. So it's side-necked turtles. To go under their shell, they have to put their neck to the side. Hidden necks are generally what we have in the Midwest. They retreat their head into their shell if they can, which we'll talk about. And then also then it splits into soft shell turtles and hard shell turtles. And this is where our turtles in Nebraska are going to lie. We have 2 soft shell turtles and the rest are going to be hard shell turtles in the Chelidridae and then the Kinosternidae families. So that's pond turtles and then snapping turtles as well. So in Nebraska, however, we have 9 species or types of turtles. So I want to quickly break down who our neighbors are, who you might see out there in the wilds. And this is going to be pretty comparable to our states around us as well. Iowa does have a couple more species than us. I'm sure Colorado and South Dakota are the same. I'm not as much of an expert on them. But our first guest of the day is the painted turtle. These guys are very common. I'm sure you've seen them if you go to a pond or a lake. They have this very pretty, almost painted plaster on. So that orange kind of red color is very indicative of a painted turtle. They don't get very huge, maybe like about this big. But most of the ones you see are like kind of this big, right? They're kind of small. They have that pretty plaster on. They're pretty much found all over the state of Nebraska. And like I said, they're pretty superfluous in nature. Secondly, we have probably the second most common turtle that you'll see in ponds and lakes around here is the red-eared slider turtle. They're called sliders because they sit on rocks and then they slide off if they get scared. Their plastron is not that pretty red color. It is yellow with spots. And there is some variation, but that's kind of the average of what you would see. And these guys get much bigger, like dinner plate sized, large. They're called red-eared because where their ear would be is a little red streak. And you'll notice from the map that they're supposed to be only found in the very southeastern county of Nebraska. However, these guys are very, very common in the pet trade. And so, people have them. They don't realize they can live for like 40, 50 years. Little Jimmy goes off to college and then we release his pet turtle, at Heron Haven. And so they survive and they thrive very well in the state of Nebraska, but they're not really supposed to be in these areas. And they do compete with painted turtles and other native turtles for resources. So you see them, unfortunately, pretty much throughout the entire state. And they are in lakes and ponds here in Omaha, and they've just kind of become naturalized to the environment. It's kind of like bullfrogs. Bullfrogs are more of a southern species, but we see them all over the state. They're here, they're not really going away. And so it's kind of hard. You kind of decide, well, when are they now considered a native species or are they introduced? But they're pretty much everywhere. So that's the red-eared slider. Next, we have the yellow mud turtle, which I would guess you've probably never seen. And this is because they live their entire lives in the mud. They will come out sometimes, but not very often. They're not like our painted turtles or sliders that are going to hang out and bask on rocks very much. They are born in the mud and the sediment alongside ponds, and they pretty much spend their entire lives there. They're pretty small. They're like this big. And interestingly, there's been some studies on them that show that they have some maternal characteristics. Most reptiles we don't think of as being great parents. They just kind of drop their eggs and leave, and they don't have a lot of parental care that's associated with them. But there's been some studies that maybe yellow mud turtles hang out around their babies and try to protect them at least a little bit. So these guys, their natural range is a little bit split. They do like a very specific kind of muddy, sandy soil, and we don't really find that everywhere in our state. And so they are kind of more down into Kansas and the southern counties, and then up in the Sandhills region as well. So then we move into our soft shell friends. This guy is not what you would traditionally think of when you maybe see a turtle. It's kind of more akin to a pancake. But the smooth soft-shell turtle can become very, very large, like maybe not that big, maybe like this big. And they are definitely more in a little bit larger rivers and faster moving waters. So not really a pond type stagnant water species. They like to be in moving water, and kind of like this picture looks like, they'll get down into the sand and the soil and kind of let the water just run over their backs. Hang out under the rocks, under the water, and they use their little kind of snorkel like snout to come up and either breathe air or to grab some fish or crustaceans as their meal. They're very camouflaged right across the carapace there, and like the name suggests, it is a very soft shell. It's kind of leathery and pancakey like a stingray. If you've ever gone to the zoo and petted the stingrays there, it feels very similar to that. Then we have the spiny soft-shell turtle. This guy does not get quite as large, and he does have these very scary spines along the forward part of his carapace. Just kidding, they're soft and they're very, very small. But that is where he gets the name. On this picture I like, you can kind of see that snorkel little snout as well too, that they use to make sure that they're sitting at the bottom of the water, but they can still bring their head up and sip some air. They will come out on shores to bask a little bit, but not quite as much as our other species. They're pretty secretive and shy and usually will retreat to the water pretty quickly. So they are a little bit more found throughout the state. Once again, a little bit more of a moving water species, but they can become displaced into some stagnant water as well. Okay, then we have another famous contender, which is the snapping turtle. Snapping turtles can get very, very large. If you've ever been to Schramm Nature Center and Aquarium, you'll know they have about 100-pound snapping turtle, and he's estimated as well to be about 100 years old. So reptiles, just by nature of how their metabolism is, can be very, very, very long-lived. And so because they live the slow life, their body ages very differently than mammals. And so snapping turtles are kind of one of those ones that once they get to a certain age and they get very large, they don't have a lot of natural predators as well. And so there's not a lot that's picking them off. They're found completely throughout the entire state. They live in ponds, lakes, sewage ponds, rivers. They are not very particular. They're definitely a generalist as far as where they like to live. And one kind of cool thing is they are nature's cleanup crew. They like to eat dead things, trash, detritus, things in the nature that we see as not desirable. They like to clean those things up, which is really awesome. One thing I like to mention is a lot of people think that, snapping turtles are mean or aggressive, and they have what's called a reduced plastron, right? So we talked about that bottom part of the shell called the plastron. Some turtles, as you guys pointed out, they can go recede into their shell. They can bring their arms and legs in, and they're fairly safe within their shell. Snapping turtles cannot do this, like on any level. Their plastron is very, very small. So this is a tiny guy, but it's the same as a very large snapping turtle. It's just harder to pick them up and turn them over to look at their plastron. But they have all this excess skin, on the outside. These are kind of like nature's chicken nuggets at this point. And so they have adapted to be snappy and be like, hey, don't even get close to me. Don't even think about it. As their like predator defense, right? Because they have this small plastron, they're not hiding in their shell anywhere. They're not very fast. So snapping is kind of their only predator defense. Okay, now we move on to some of our more rarer friends. The Blandings turtle is a cute guy. He has a very lovely little yellow smile. He thrives in prairies and wetlands. However, those types of habitats are really at risk and are going away, unfortunately, in Nebraska as we move into more farm and agricultural land. And so as those wetlands are drained, we start to lose the habitat for the Blandings turtle. So Blandings turtles are an at-risk species. They are recognized by the Nebraska Natural Legacy Plan as at risk, and thus they are protected by law. Basically, that means you shouldn't be touching them or moving them or anything like that. Interestingly, it's also a state law in Nebraska that you cannot relocate reptiles more than, I think it's like 10 to 20 yards. Or 100 yards. It's 100 yards. So 2 football fields lengths away. Maybe it's less than that. Anyways, you're not supposed to relocate reptiles very far because we have really recognized how small their home territories are, and especially their home waterways or water features that they like. They're really dependent on those. And so, our Nebraska game parks, they know this. And so they have put limitations on how far you can relocate turtles, which generally people aren't out there moving a bunch of turtles anyways. But if you want to keep one as a pet, just know that that is illegal to keep them or to relocate them as well. So Blanding's turtles, like I said, kind of more found in prairie areas and wetlands. They're a little bit more of a land species, so it's pretty common to see them up on land and in the dirt. Whereas secondly, we have the false map turtle. This is a bad picture for this, but on their carapace, there's kind of these lines. It looks like a topographical map almost. It's a map to nowhere, hence the false map. They're easy to identify because of these little dorsal spikes or fins on their carapace as well. And these guys are really only found in the Missouri River Valley. So they hang out on the eastern side of the state in the Missouri River, eat lots of fish, crustaceans, insects, stuff like that. Okay, so these guys are also protected by law, so no touchy. Lastly, we have the ornate box turtle. So this guy, unlike a lot of turtles where I talked about that cannot really go inside their shell, or they can retreat partially inside their shell, the ornate box turtle is the exception, right? It's kind of like the little turtle shell that you see in Mario Kart. It's like completely enclosed. They can suck their arms in, their head in, and they're very, very protected. So I'm going to grab our special guest here before I continue on. Okay, so I have some turtles that live here with me, and they're box turtles. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen just for a second here. Okay, so this is a box turtle. He's not very happy. You can see on his plastron that this top part is kind of squishy. And that is because that is where that hinge right here is what he can. If he is scared, he can put his arms and his leg in his shell and retreat inside there and hide. If I do this, he kind of does that, but otherwise, he's pretty used to humans, so he's probably not going to hide in his shell for us. On their carapace, they have these really pretty lines, which is why they are called ornate box turtles. There are actually lots of different types of box turtles, but the one that occurs naturally here in Nebraska is the ornate box turtle. He also loves to live in prairies, so you can kind of imagine if you're looking down into prairie grass, this could kind of camouflage in with the grass as well. They are entirely a land-dwelling species, so they cannot respire air from water like some of our other turtles can. They cannot swim. They are entirely land-dwelling species. Now, I know in the English language, we really like to call that tortoise, but this is a turtle. He is related to land turtles. He shares genetic information and genetic lineage with our pond turtles. And yeah, he lives entirely on land. So it's a little cool because he's going to have a little bit different diet and habitat than a lot of our other turtles. He eats a lot of insects. He is an omnivore, so he will eat some vegetables if he can find them. Some prickly pear fruit is a favorite of theirs as well. And another kind of cool thing is we recently found out that they will eat some vertebrates as well. So this guy will eat some baby birds. If he can find some ground nesting birds, he will eat baby mice and other rodents that he can find. There was a study done where they were studying swallows. And I remember a scientist was telling me he had a mist net for these swallows, and some of the swallows that got down to the bottom of the net, a box turtle came over and was trying to eat the adult swallow. So they're pretty not aggressive, but they're pretty solid for their size, and they will eat a lot of things that they think are bigger than them, and they definitely have eyes that are bigger than their stomachs. So this is the ornate box turtle. His name is Drogon. Does the ornate box turtle actually hibernate in the winter? Yes, yeah. So this guy is really dependent on prairie dog towns. And so we talk about prairie dogs as being a keystone species because so many species depend on their towns, and they live primarily in prairie dog towns. They will also live in other animal burrows, but that's kind of the key one that they really like, especially out west. And so they will hibernate or brumate in those burrows. They'll try and get underneath the frost line if they can, but if they can't, they can survive a little bit above it as well too. And we'll talk about that as well. So last goodbye for the turtle, and then we're going to continue on with the end of our presentation here. I don't know if there's anything else you want to see on him. He has some pretty sharp claws. One cool thing too about box turtles is they're sexually dimorphic, which basically means that the males and the females look different on the outside of their bodies. So like color, right? It's something other than genitalia. So the males will have red eyes and red spots on their forelimbs, which I don't know how good my camera is, but you can kind of tell his eye is red. And the females will have more golden color eyes and then no red spots on the forelimbs. So yeah, it's him. He's got some, yeah, once again, he doesn't have webbed toes like a lot of our, oh, here he's showing us, he kind of suck his back toes in there. But yeah, definitely a land dwelling species, and pretty cool that we have one in Nebraska. So I'm going to put him back in his home really quickly. And just say quickly that I should share my screen here again. So looking at this map, they are more on the western side of the state is where they're pretty common. We do, however, sometimes find them in Omaha. So for example, the one that was here today was found like on 72nd and Dodge, very confused, not where he's supposed to be. And this is pretty much always because they're a dumped pet, right? Someone went into the sandhills. They're not really sold. Ornate box turtles are not really sold as pet species in pet stores. They're a little bit more protected than that. You go out to sandhills as a kid, you find this tiny little turtle, you take it home. Once again, this guy lives to be like 30 years old. So people aren't prepared to have a turtle or an animal that can live that long. They're like, well, it's in Nebraska, right? And then they release it, and bad things happen. So our soil is a little bit too hard for them to dig. It's hard for them to find burrows. And so it's just not really a great habitat for them. Okay, so what do turtles do in the winter? We talked about this a little bit. They're going to do a form of hibernation, which is called brumation. So brumation is a little bit different because mammals will hibernate, and mammals' metabolism slows down, but not to the extremes that reptiles and amphibians do. So brumation is just kind of like hibernation, but it's like on steroids. It's like way past what mammals are able to do. So hopefully you know that ectotherms, or cold-blooded animals, their body temperature is dictated by the environment, right? So if it is 70 degrees in my office, the turtle that I just had, his body is 70 degrees. His body, his blood, everything in him is going to be the same as their environment. So they have to seek out things in their environment to warm up or to cool down. And so if it is 30 degrees, in the wintertime, their body is going to be 30 degrees. For turtles, it's a little bit tough for them to get into the freezing temperatures below 30 degrees, but there are some species that are hardier and are able to withstand that, which we'll talk about too in a second here. So their heart rate, where maybe it's going to be like 50 beats per minute in the summertime, it's going to go down to 1 beat every 10 minutes, which is crazy. So this is something that scientists really study in brumation, because if we think about like, man, if we could send a human being to Mercury or whatever, right? If we could slow down our bodies, brumation is a huge reason why reptiles live so long, right? Because their bodies start to just like slow down exponentially. So 1 beat for every 10 minutes, which is crazy. And then respiration rate, how much their breathing is going to slow down as well. So if they're respiring maybe 10 times per minute, when they're awake and they're alert, it's going to go down to 0 to 1 breath per minute. So you might say, how is it 0 breaths per minute? There are different ways for turtles to respire or to breathe. One of the ways is esophageal breathing. I'm forgetting the word for it right now, but they can suck water in through their mouth, and then the highly vascularized tissue of their throat can absorb the oxygen. The other one is cloacal breathing, which is, if you've heard that turtles can breathe through their butts, it's kind of true. All turtles and birds, their digestive system, reproductive systems end in this kind of catch-all organ called the cloaca. That cloaca, when water moves across, once again, highly vascularized, lots of blood vessels on that skin, it can absorb oxygen from the water as well. And so that's not really breathing, right? It's kind of just absorbing. And so that's where we get that like 0 breaths per minute. Because a lot of these turtles are spending the entire winter underneath the water. Which is super crazy. Whereas when they're alert and awake, they might come up to the surface and actually like breathe in water or breathe in air. In wintertime, things are very different. So this is very extreme. A groundhog who in hibernation is not getting anywhere near these body metrics, right? So reptiles are just kind of on a different level. Another kind of cool thing, amphibians kind of take this even further, and there's some species of frogs that their bodies will freeze solid, but they're still alive. There's different things that kind of mix in their blood that makes this antifreeze, and even though their bodies freeze over, they still come back awake in the springtime. So reptiles are pretty cool. Okay, so I want to play this brief video that kind of explains what I just talked about.
While it may be shocking to see turtles seemingly lifeless beneath the ice, they're actually just brumating, which is a survival strategy they use to survive the harsh winter months and the extreme cold. When temperatures start to drop, snapping turtles head for the water and enter a state of brumation, a slowed state of activity for cold-blooded animals where they eat less but don't fully sleep.
Their body temperature is dependent upon external temperature, so as the external temperature cools, thereby their metabolism really slows down to next to nothing. And at that point, the oxygen demands are extremely low. That doesn't mean that they just stop breathing per se, but they breathe in a different way.
They're able to breathe by moving water across their bodies and extracting the oxygen from it, a process called cloacal respiration. In other words, they breathe through their backsides, and they go underwater versus staying on land because water temps remain relatively stable throughout the winter.
You might have a layer of ice on top of the pond, but the water below is not frozen.
Okay, so that just kind of talks about, I love the visualization of seeing the turtles underneath the ice, right? A lot of people see that and they freak out and they call us and they're like, this turtle's stuck in the ice. And we just have to explain that's a natural process, right? That's actually how they get through the brutal cold of the winter, is by embracing it. So there's a little video for us. I also
Turtles that choose to brew.
get out of here. Wanted to talk briefly about turtles in rehab as well, and why they come to us. How can we help our shelled friends? So at the clinic, this is data from 2024, but it's been like pretty much the same every year since. So I haven't changed this. First of all, far and away, we get snapping turtles the most. It seems like they just get into trouble more often. We also, just because of how things have happened, we've gotten turtles in the past where they are gravid or they have babies in them, right? They are pregnant basically. And so then we have overwintered the babies. And so then we end up having, lots longer. It kind of affects our data. Painted turtles is a close second. Red-eared sliders is third. This year we did get a random Russian tortoise that was someone's escaped pet that we had for a hot second there. And then we do get some ornate box turtles. So looking at why turtles come into care, a very small percent of them is due to other reasons. 30% is due to fishing hooks and lines. So this picture, there is a hook in the turtle's mouth. Some people are trying to catch turtles. Most people are not. They're trying to catch fish, but they will still go for your bait regardless. And sometimes they swallow that hook and sometimes they don't. So we can do surgery depending on how far it is down into their digestive system and replace that. However, 66% of the animals that come to us are hit by a vehicle, right? And that's because generally, by far and away, they are females and they are pregnant females who are going to lay eggs, right? That is why turtles travel. Turtles generally, like I said, they stay in their home territories. They have a very small space. That is their home and they stay there for the rest of their lives. Turtles that are traveling are females that are going to lay eggs. And where we might say, hey, that's a city park, don't lay your eggs there. There is such a strong sensation for them to go to the same place every year and lay those eggs. And I don't know, why they pick the places they do, but they want to go there. And so if they have to cross roads, they will. And if they get hit by cars, hopefully it's something that we can help, but a lot of times we can't. Vehicle turtle injuries can be quite severe, as you can imagine. So we have an x-ray here. This was a turtle that came to us. This is a pretty large, either like catfish hook or maybe even turtle hook, but it was cut loose. Someone found it and brought it to us. I like this picture too, because you can kind of visualize the spine and the bones of the arm and kind of how those all come together. And then I want to talk briefly about, okay, I'm driving my car, I find a turtle in the road. What do I need to do, right? What size is the hatchling when it hatches? How often does the ornate turtle breed and lay eggs? I think it's once per year, but I might be wrong on that. And what time of year does this occur? So turtles generally lay their eggs a little bit later in the summer. I'm not sure about ornate box turtles, but snapping turtles and painted turtles, we generally see hatching and moving in like July. Hatchlings, it depends on the turtle, but I mean, they can be like this big. Snapping turtles are generally about the size of $50 when they come out of their egg. Painted turtles are even a little bit smaller. They're teeny tiny. And so, yeah, they have to very quickly try and get to water. It can be very, very tough depending on where their mom laid her eggs. But they have that drive. They, it's kind of like sea turtles. They're very good about finding that water. And then a lot of them stay in the water until they're about 4 or 5 years old and a little bit bigger and able to defend themselves. So yeah, good question. Couple ways you can hold a turtle. Sandwich hold, just kind of like holding a sandwich. You can hold on their plastron and their carapace. They can kick you and scratch you a little bit with this hold, so just be careful. The platter hold is a little bit safer, especially with larger turtles, kind of just like a hand on their plastron, like you're holding a platter. And then you can put your hand in like what I call the wheel wells of the shell. So you can kind of see his hand right here is holding the carapace, but above the foot. And so generally they can't scratch you with this hold. With bigger turtles, you can use like your car mats to kind of pull them onto the mat and then pull them off the road as well. What we do not want to do is hold turtles by their tail. It's kind of like if you picked a toddler up by their arm, right? They would probably be fine, but it also probably hurts a lot. So we don't want to do that. We want to use our sandwich hold or a platter hold, whatever feels safe for you. And if you are not an adult, you should always have an adult with you if you're picking up a turtle. And you should only be picking them up if they need help. One thing to note is that, like I said, turtles they want to go where they want to go. So even if it doesn't make sense to you, if the turtle is moving away from a water source, always take them to the other side of the road that they are already trying to get to, because otherwise they're going to keep coming out and they're going to keep trying to cross that road. So then I have one more video. And this kind of demonstrates those holds. And then also you can just kind of see snapping turtle anatomy a little bit better. And there's an area where you can see that reduced plastron as well.
This is Frank Taylor with Nature at Your Door Road. It's very important to get behind it. You don't want to pick him up by the sides of the shell because, as you can see, his neck is really long. And they don't get the name snapping turtles for nothing. These guys really, really do snap aggressively when they're trapped out on land, like this one is. So I'm going to go behind her and pick her up by the rear like this. And so now I've got her. I put my hands underneath her carapace above her legs so her legs can't scratch me. And I really need to stay with my face far enough away from her mouth. And you can see that on land, they will also hiss, and you may see her hissing. So this is a female snapping turtle. And I did want to show you underneath, you see how the plastron is very small? That's one of the identifiers of a snapping turtle. It's very small, and so she can't pull herself back into that shell like other turtles can. It's fascinating to see the detail on their legs, the dinosaur-like spines that are there. And you can see he's kind of hissing at me right now, or she. So the reason I think is that's the part of the shell on his stomach, and he's just not able to pull in. It's fascinating to see.
So yeah, you can also visualize once again how long their necks are and how far they can extend them. So if you're holding a turtle, don't put your head down and look at him because that would be very bad. But yes, they're a dinosaur species. They're so cool. And yeah, they're awesome. Snapping turtles get a bad rap, but I think they're super cool. So the last thing I have for you, and then if you have any other questions, you can feel free to drop them in the chat as well, is a QR code. And this goes to a couple different things. If you're interested in volunteering, it goes to our volunteer application. I run several education ventures, most notably a high school science academy. If you know anyone interested in that, you can check that out. More information about us, donation links. We do run completely off of donations. We're a nonprofit, so we don't receive money from the state or the government. All of that great stuff. Also social media, right? That's a really big one. We share all of our patients with you, as many as we can, on Facebook or Instagram. Really cute stuff. So definitely, if anything, follow us on Facebook. So questions. Yeah, so if there's any last questions, hello, Glenn. It's nice to see you. I'm glad you're here. Cool. We'll wait a couple more seconds on questions. However, I think Morgan has a survey for you as well.
Yes, if we could get that shared promise, it'll just pop up on the screen there. And then there is a question in the Q&A that I did not see right away. Let's see here.
Awesome.
We have Don, yeah, Don's asking how many babies can a snapping turtle have per year?
Oh man, so a lot. They generally have one clutch or collection of eggs per year, and they can have anywhere from like 20 to we've had a female that was with us who had over 40 eggs inside of her. And so they have a lot of babies, and a lot of them aren't going to survive, right? So um, I'm forgetting what that technical term for that is, but generally animals that have more babies, their survival or their mortality rates are going to be higher than the ones that have less. So they do have a lot of eggs because not a lot of them will make it, but hopefully a lot of them do and live on for a very long time. Okay, so looks like we've got some questions here. Spends most of her, even elderly box turtle who spends a lot of time hiding. Yeah, I would say this is pretty sorry. I would say that's pretty normal. If they're not basking, they really like to hide, especially right now. Like my turtles are trying to brumate as hard as they can. It's not getting cold enough for them to do that, but they can tell from the way the sun, we're not having as much daylight hours. And it's a little bit cooler and drier. They're just underneath the mulch all the time hiding. So in the summertime, if you want to stimulate a little bit more activity, you can get like a kiddie pool and put them outside for a little bit. Reptiles are more active the more warm they are. So if it's really hot temperatures, they're not going to be super active. But if it's like in that 80 to 90 degree range, that's when they're like really enjoying it and they're going to be more active. Someone also said, are you going to repeat this class again? I will not, but this is being recorded and will be on their YouTube page, so you can check that out. Any diseases they carried if your dog had a painted turtle in his mouth? Not really. So they can have some bacteria on their shells, but there's going to be more bacteria in your dog's mouth than on the turtle shell. If you've heard that you can catch salmonella from turtles, that is true, but it is generally turtles that are kept in a tank that is not very clean. So wild turtles, this really isn't an issue. With turtles that are kept in an aquarium, that's when we think about salmonella and not touching the turtles and then touching our mouths. When do you release the bats? Can you talk a little bit more about that? Yes. So we release anywhere from 200 to 500 bats in the springtime. These are all bats that were found in Omaha and in a specific range. So it's like from the Missouri River to like 72nd Street. We keep all those bats and release them in one big event in the springtime. I cannot tell you the exact date because we do not know it until about 2 days out. If you think about the spring, the wind has to be perfect. There can be no rain in the forecast. The weather has to be good. So just keep an eye out in, we say like April and May on our social media, and we'll let you know, hey, it's happening in 2 days. It's going to be at the riverfront again this year. And they are generally all big brown bats, which is our most common species of bat in Nebraska. And then, yeah, we release them at the riverfront because that's a very good spot where we have a lot of studies that bats will then return to the place that they came from. They have really good location abilities. And so that is a close spot where if they were found, from the Missouri River to 72nd Street, they can get very easily back to where they came. So if you live downtown and you're worried about us releasing all the bats, don't worry, they're not going to all stay in the downtown area. How do you trim a 50-year-old turtle's beak? Yeah, it's hard, and you may, depending on how long it is, you might want to visit a vet and have them at least trim it down until it's until it's like at least more of a little bit normal. I usually use a Dremel tool, which I would definitely say if you're not familiar with that or you haven't been trained, I would see your veterinarian and have them show you how to do that. I use a Dremel to trim down their nails as well too, because in captivity they just don't keep their nails as short as they usually do. Counted for over 50 years. That is super cool. We rehab songbirds. Will you do a presentation about songbirds? That's a good question. It's not something I have prepared, but it's something I can definitely keep in mind as something to create. Songbirds are so fun because we we'll get these little tiny baby pinky birds sometimes, and it's like, I don't know what they are. You can tell from their foot formation and their beak color, like you can guess. But sometimes it's like we start raising them and, oh, it's an oriole or it's a bluebird. So songbirds are definitely the most diverse type of animal that we get here. A tortoise could probably not survive in Nebraska. It's interesting because some have to deal with really cold environments in deserts. And so you might argue that something like a gopher tortoise or something that lives in the American Southwest could kind of deal with winter. They could definitely deal with our summers, but then the question is, they're fossorial, they like to live underground. Can they get into a burrow that's big enough for them? It's hard to tell. I think they're definitely okay to have as pets. I think land turtles or tortoises are easier to take care of than aquarium turtles, just because of how much maintenance there is in an aquarium. I think, once again, they're great to have as pets. Just have a plan for if you can no longer take care of them, do not release them into the wild. 13 Moons on a Turtle Shell. I have not read that book, but someone else has recommended it to me, so I'll definitely write that down. And more questions and question and answer. Can you swim in a pond safely that has more than, yes. Snapping turtles, like I said, they're not really eating a lot of live things. Most of their diet is dead stuff. So when they detect motion, they're gonna hide. And so I've definitely been in a couple situations where I have been trying to save goslings or ducklings, and I'm like in bodies of water that definitely have more than a couple snapping turtles, and I've never come across them. So that is definitely definitely safe. Is there an organization in Nebraska that helps prevent the release of pets? There isn't really. I mean, Nebraska Humane Society, you know, is gonna advocate for pets and for humane ways to pass your pet on, but there really otherwise isn't an organization that stops that. I would say us in Game and Parks, you know, if we find an exotic animal, we're gonna take it from the wild and try and find a better place for it. Do eggs and babies have a higher hatch rate or survival rate in the rehab center than their? Yes. I mean, they do. Just by nature, there's no predators, and we also feed them a very steady diet. We will also, if we get a pregnant or gravid female who lays eggs with us, we generally keep them over the winter time to give them a little bit of a head start. And so, yeah, then they're pretty prepared the next year. They're a little bit bigger. They got some more years or some more time on them. And so they do have a better survival rate just because of being here and getting lots of food. What is my degree in? Oh, yeah. So I have a bachelor's in animal science, and then I have a master's in environmental education. Kid programs to get little biologists involved in. I don't currently run a lot of littler fun people things, but we do have a really awesome high school science academy. So when you get to be in high school, check it out for sure. Or if you have high school kids, we generally just have a bunch of professors and scientists and people from Nebraska come and talk to our kids about what they do. They're all local professors who work with wildlife and conservation. And so they talk about how they got into their careers, what they do day to day, and then like what they're studying right now. So it's a really fun program for them. And then we do after school programs for elementary and middle schoolers. So if you have an elementary school or middle schooler that goes to Norris, Bancroft, All Saints, Lewis and Clark, or Forest Station, it is an opportunity for them in the after school programs to come and go to Nebraska Wildlife Club. So that's kind of what we do for littler kids. How do turtles make love? That's a good question. So, males and females both have the same, not the same genitalia, but they both have cloacas, right? And so they do what's called a cloacal kiss, where their cloacas kiss each other, and then the sperm is taken from one cloaca to the other cloaca, and that is how they make love. How do you incubate a turtle egg? I would say don't if you don't have an incubator. It can be very, very tough. And so we do actually have a turtle incubator here at the center. So if you do find a turtle egg, you can bring it to us. If you're incubating a pet turtle egg, you can sometimes do this with a jerry-rigged like chicken egg hatcher, but it's tough because you have to rotate them constantly. They have to be at a perfect humidity. So it does take a long time. Do we take injured animals after hours? We do not, and that's really tough. There used to be a drop off at the Humane Society. There is no longer anymore. We are here in the building almost 24/7, but just because of the nature of what we do, we can't always be there receiving people and animals. So we are open every day from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. currently. In the summer, it'll be 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. And in the meantime, if you have an injured animal, on our website is really awesome instructions on how to care for that animal until we're open and available. Basically, no food, no water, just keep them in a dark, quiet box or container or kennel until we open. I think I got all of the questions.
I think that is everything, unless we get a last minute one now, if anyone has anything else.
Well, I will also put in, oh, and I'm still sharing my screen. That's my bad. I'll put in my email as well. So feel free, please, to email me if you have questions. If you have questions about turtles, if you have questions about High School Science Academy, if you have questions about what we do, feel free to shoot me an email.
Awesome. Perfect. If nothing else is coming in, I do believe that's it. I think we just have another comment here about
so I have a male and 2 females, and the male is constantly chasing the females around. So I feel for you. I understand.
Awesome. Well, I would like to say thank you, Lauren. That was very cool. And my kids got a little sneak peek of the turtle, so that made their evening. So very cool presentation. I certainly learned a lot. I really hope everyone here did. And I just want to say thank you for your time. And this was wonderful.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you everyone for coming. Make sure to fill out the survey. And if you ever find an injured animal in the future, give us a call.